What's up, TC? How you feeling this morning? You doing okay? All right, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Justin Chandler. I'm one of the pastors here at The Crossing and want to say welcome. We're so glad that you're here. And as you heard from Nicole, if this is your first weekend here and you're walking in and we're having this series called How to Make Love, like it could cause your anxiety to raise up a little bit. But what I'd love to do over the next couple of minutes is to help set that at ease, as well as to kind of give some context for where we're going today. And so one of the things we've done with this series is we looked at this concept of love and we've said, like, how is it possible for us to make it wonderful in the world? How is it possible through our relationships, our friendships, and our marriages? What would it be like for us to take love and to make that something wonderful and beautiful in the planet? And so what we've done is we've used one of the most popular paragraphs in all of history to describe love, and we've used it as a framework for all of our conversations leading up to it. And it comes from this letter to this group of people called the Corinthians, and we marked it in chapters. So in the 13th chapter, it says it like this. It says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." And so throughout this series, we've taken sections of this and kind of worked through it. And so in the very first week, what we talked about is let's make love a priority. Let's set that as the very first in our life, our relationship with God, and then our relationship to our spouse as our number one other. And then we also had these 5 one another statements that we wanted to use as a way to impact every one of our relationships. And in week number 2, we talked about what are the ingredients that we put in, that if you look from this list, love is patient and love is kind are the only 2 that are listed as positives that we put in. And so we said, what would it be like to live in a kind of way that puts patience first and kindness coming after it? And then last week we said, here's the things we'd want to remove from the recipe or the things that we'd want to keep out. And so that was how we spent the last week kind of working through all of the does not statements. And so we've treated it, even from a graphic standpoint, that this is a lot like a recipe. It's a lot about how we cook and how we prepare things, that there's a process that produces something not only in us, but has a chance to produce that in other people. And so asking the questions, what in this recipe of love, what will we put in, what will we keep out, and what would cause that to be wonderful? Because in this recipe, it's a lot like coffee, which explains why I would bring all of these things out here. Coffee for me is how I start the majority of my days, but it always hasn't been that way. When I was in college, I started drinking coffee for the first time, and a lot of it was I wanted to get out of my dorm. I wanted to find a space where it could be a little quieter, where I could do work, and so there was a local coffee shop close by that you could pay a couple of dollars, and they would give you a bottomless cup of coffee, right, so that you could be able to have that throughout your time there. And so then what I started to do was use a lot of like flavored creamer and then a lot of sugar. So essentially I was drinking coffee flavored creamer for the majority of the time. And then as I stayed long enough, I would figure out, like, I don't like opening all these packages. I don't like throwing all of this trash away. Some of you may call that laziness. I like to call that efficiency. And so what I started to do was use less creamer, and I just started drinking black coffee. And that's still the way that I drink coffee today. So shout out to all the black coffee crew. Yeah. So then as I started having that, like Rachel and I, we, got married and we went to register. And so I loved the little gun that you could carry through the store and, scan for stuff. And so this is the coffee machine that has been in the Chandler household for 10 years. Like this is our one and only. Some people were concerned about Rachel, right? Like if this is how we drink coffee, how's she doing this morning? I recently upgraded to be a French press coffee drinker, right? So I'm super exquisite, right? And there's some of you who are like, you don't even know. You're not touching my AeroPress or my Chemex. We can have a conversation afterwards, right? So we had this. And I, knew coffee was important, but I had no idea how important coffee was to our relationship until the very first days. Because when I wake up ready for the world, right? Coffee for me is an additive. It's something that I can have instead of drinking soda. It feels like a better life choice. And so I can remember early on, I rolled over and I said, it was some ridiculous conversation I wanted to start with Rachel, right? Like, hey, good morning. What do you think the largest contributor to our economy is right now? And she was like, what? And I can remember she just like used one of her fingers and put it up to my lips, and she was like, shh, shh, shh. She was like, no coffee, no talkie. I was like, oh, we've come there. And so then throughout our relationship, that's been how we've operated. No coffee, no talkie. And so then I'll make coffee in the morning. And there's multiple times where Rachel will wake up and then she'll take a drink of the coffee and she's like, oh, that's really good coffee. Now, what does she mean when she says that, right? She doesn't mean that this grind and brew is good. right? She doesn't mean that the water we use in our coffee is good, which is not at all an indictment against the water district. She doesn't mean that the cup that she's drinking out of is good. She doesn't mean that the beans that we're using there, whether whole bean, ground, however we scoop them in, she's not meaning that that is good. What does she mean when she says coffee's good? She means when you take all of these elements together, when you follow the process, when you use the recipe, when you do as it's intended to be done, the final product of that thing is good. And the same thing is true of every one of our relationships, right? Every one of our relationships, when done right and love pursued right, it is good. But just like coffee, you and I have had moments where we've had a bad one. And if you drink a bad cup of coffee, you don't think like all coffee is bad now. Like coffee is awful, it's the worst thing ever created. Maybe you just need a better cup of coffee. And if you walk in today with some relationships and you're considering love, and you think it's all wrong, it's all busted, it's broken, this is where it went off, maybe it's not love that's the issue. Maybe you just need a better cup. So here's one thing I'd love for you to remember. If you forget everything else that I say today, I want you to remember this one phrase. We'll put it up on the screen for you. This phrase is this: love the product, trust the process. Love the product, trust the process. I'll say it one more time because I hear it helps everybody remember. Love the product, trust the process. So when you see this list and we start to work through it, right? When you see this paragraph and it comes up on the screen, what comes to mind and what does this recipe bring out for you? Because a lot of times when we see stuff, like you could say, depending on your life experience or depending on your age, you could say, this feels nothing like the love that I'm used to. That love is patient and love is kind, right? Love doesn't envy, love doesn't get angry, love doesn't boast, love's not self-seeking. And then you get into these always statements, right? That it's not a sometimes or an occasionally on its best day, that love always protects, love always trusts, love always hopes, love always perseveres. Like this could be the moment where the conflict starts to occur. This could be the space where we start running into issues because our love and our experience with love hasn't been like that. And so maybe there was a love in your life that said it was gonna be an always kind of love. Maybe it was a commitment you made on an altar. Maybe it was a relationship you had with your parents or a friend or a family member. Maybe there was a love in your life that said always, but then always ran out at some point. Or maybe there was a love that told you it would be like this, and then not too long into that relationship, it changed. Or maybe love ran out for you. That there was an always and forever kind of love, and then eventually for you, it felt like always and forever, felt like no longer. And so in this chapter, what we're gonna look at today is we're gonna look at this very last verse, that it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Now, the key word for us in this section is this word always. Because for us in the English language, when we hear the word always, what we think of is a measurement of time, right? We think of something from now and going on to forever, this always constancy kind of thing. Here's the primary definition that we have for the word always. It means at all times, forever, at any rate, and in any event. So when we hear the word always, that's primarily what we think of. And always and forever influences our understanding of love. It's what happens at Valentine's Day on cards. It's what happens in the songs that we sing, in the movies that we watch. This always and forever thing is embedded into our cultural DNA. So just consider this as an example. Like one of the most recent movies kind of around this concept is The Notebook. Right, so maybe you've seen The Notebook, maybe you love The Notebook, right? This is where Ryan Gosling kind of fell into all of our hearts with his bearded handsome, right? Like this is where he took over the culture. And so here's this scene. You've got these two people working out their relationship and figuring out how it goes. Here's what he says to her. It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be really hard. We're gonna have to work at this every day. But I wanna do that because I want you. I want all of you, forever, you and me, every day. And you can see that maybe she's not feeling it in the same way that he is. And then not too long after this moment, it gets into the most infamous scene for me from this movie because it helps to describe every relationship when it's trying to decide, what do you want to eat? So he looks right at her and he says, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And I feel like there's times where I'm driving around in the car with my wife and she's like, I'm hungry. And I look at her and I'm like, well, what do you want? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you want? And then she'll say, but this and this, what do you want? And then she'll say, I don't know, you decide. And then I'll decide and she'll say, not that. And then I'll look at her and I'll say, what do you want, right? So there's that moment from this movie. You could think of love in that, like, right? The Notebook, always and forever, hooray. Some of you think of love in the Sandlot version of love, which would be forever, 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 forever. You think of the old ball and chain. stuck together forever. You think of the moments and the conversations you have with your friends where you're like, hey, I think I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with this person. They're like, forever? Like, for one person? Forever? Are you sure? Like, I mean, I like them, but forever? And we start to think of love like that. And so for us, whenever we move from one language to another, there's times where we translate it correctly, we get the essence of the phrase, but we don't get all that word captures. It happens when we move from English to Spanish, Spanish to English. It also happens in the Bible when we move through the languages that it was written in. So the Bible comes in two primary languages, Hebrew and Greek. And so the passage we're reading right now is in Greek. So this word that we've been reading is always gets pulled over to English, and where always is kind of, and it's almost, it's not all of it. So I want to show you this word translated two different times, and we're going to put both of them on the screen for you. So the first way that we read it here says, love always protects, love always trusts, love always hopes, love always perseveres. Another way it gets translated is love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. So what happens here is it's not just a measurement of time. It's also a measurement of like space and matter and everything. So we have this everything into forever concept. Are you kind of seeing that, right? So it's not just love will always do this. Love is taking the sum total of these things, in specific these words, and it's saying everything that word is, we are going to take that on into forever. And so it's all of these ones working together. We're going to kind of, over the next couple of minutes, work through what a all and always kind of love would be like specific to these three phrases. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some ways for you to see it in your life, but then I'm also going to give you a question you can ask yourself, and a question you could ask somebody else. Maybe it's a friend, a partner, or someone you're married to, that you could be able to ask them this question because it'll help us in each one of those areas. So we'll start right back up at the top, that love always protects. And I don't know what you hear or what you think of when you hear the word protects, but most of the time what comes to our mind is us being able to fend off danger, right? Like I've been meeting with this guy once a week who once was a bouncer at a biker bar. And if that's your concept of protects, like I am woefully inadequate for that. Like I will never serve as a bouncer, and I don't know if I get to be the gatekeeper at a biker bar ever, but I don't think I'm the one, right? So when that happens, if that comes to mind, like I'm falling woefully short. And I saw this on display early with Rachel and I. So we went to this movie, and it was billed a thriller. What I realized about a third of the way in is this is a horror movie, and it is not at all a thriller. And as like the tension and all the stuff was working its way out, I realized I was death gripping her leg. That I had moved from like cup holder and I had transitioned to her leg, and soon it was like this in a moment of absolute tension. Now, I don't know if she realized or not. So I started to very slowly, very graciously just kind of let go. And then I just tapped her leg to let her know, you're okay, you're safe. I'm gonna be able to take really good care of you, and I hope you're not mortally wounded, right? Like there's that part of it. And so that shows for me, like if I have to fight off all of the danger in the planet always in order to love, like I don't think that I have that. But as we've seen from this all and always, what happens with the word protects is it means much more than that. What protects means, or what it has the way to show us, is that it's not just danger. It's us being able to protect the person, protect us. So it's not just danger, it's any kind of annoyance, any kind of difficulty, any kind of circumstance. Love protects us, love protects that person. And that's where we start to see the concept bear out, right? It's me saying, whatever you're going through or whatever's coming in from the outside, I'm not gonna let it influence us on the inside. So there may be some things going on, but I'm gonna protect you and I'm gonna protect us. Love is gonna be able to push through. Love is gonna be able to make it. Love is gonna be able to make through whatever circumstances are happening. Love will see it to the end because love always protects. And so then I start to ask myself this question around my friendships. And I say, so do I always protect my friendships? Do I look at my friends and I say, no matter the circumstance, no matter the annoyance, no matter the difficulty, am I gonna protect you? Am I gonna protect us? Do I look at these moments or these things that we go through and I say, man, maybe this annoyance is less about them and it's more about me. Maybe my own annoyance or difficulty or circumstance has more to say about Justin than it has to say about this other person, right? To say like, maybe this is being used to produce something in me, not for me to try to push somebody away. So I start to ask that question. And then I think about, all right, what about my relationship with my wife? And then it gets even more serious because I'm a competitive person by nature. And there's times in our relationship where I've made decisions to win. And it doesn't take long in any relationship for you to realize, like, you may win, but you can totally lose, right? You lost that little conflict, you won the conflict, but you lost the war. And there's times where we can start to say, like, I'm gonna win here, but what about for Rachel? What about when she's annoyed, or she's having a difficult circumstance, or she's having hard times? Do I protect her, or do I try to protect me? Do I go defensive rather than helping her? And so here's a question I'd love for you to consider, a question you can ask yourself, but a question also we could ask of other people that I think will help us in conflict, but it's also gonna help us protect. We'll put it up on the screen for you. Is there any way I can alleviate stress for you, if only a small amount? So if you have a friend, if you're in a relationship with somebody, this is an incredible question that you could ask that would help you to protect them. Is there any way I can alleviate stress for you, if only a small amount? Here's the question you could ask yourself. Is there something in your life that's absolutely stressing you out, but you haven't told anybody yet? And maybe you could allow other people into your life and other people into the circumstance, and they could be an unbelievable gift to help and protect you through what you're going through. Any level of annoyance, any circumstance, any difficulty, if you were to be able to know that, maybe you could share that with somebody who's close to you, and they would be able to jump in and protect. Because love always says, you're gonna make it through. You're not alone. I'm gonna bear this with you because I love you. And because I love you, we're gonna go through this together. But not only does love protect, love always trusts. And when you hear the word trust, like, it may bring up for you trust issues more than the actual word trust. Because if we're honest, we are dealing in a time where we're moving further away from trust and we're closer to skepticism. Whether it's politics or pastors or just random people, we've moved away from trusting people, and we have a tendency to be more skeptic at the beginning. One of the phrases I often think of when I think of trust is this one. It says, trust is built in drops and lost in buckets, right? It's gonna take me a long time to trust you, and if you break that trust, it's all over, and it's gonna take you a long time to be able to earn it back. But then just think about the number of things that people put online, especially in like Facebook posts or Instagram posts, when it comes around trust. Like, these quotes often will come up. Trusting you is my decision. Proving me right is your choice. My love is unconditional. My trust and respect are not. Be careful who you trust. The devil was once an angel, which that one seems like jaded and burned, right? But if you're like, hey, you got some people out there, the devil was nice one time too, so watch out. Like, that starts to influence how we think about trust. And what I want to be sure that you understand when we say, like, love always trusts, what love isn't saying is you have to believe every word that comes out of someone's mouth. That no matter what they say, no matter what happens, you gotta trust them. Like, that's not at all what it's saying. It says love believes also. Love believes and trusts a person beyond whatever the circumstance is or beyond whatever the issue is. That our trust is able to look at something in front and say, this may be true right now, but it's not gonna be true forever, or I can see beyond what's true right now. A friend of mine helped to make this statement a little while ago. He said this: what's true about you may not be the truth about you. And there's times where there's something that's true right now, but it may not be the truth about who you are. Since my time here at the Crossing, like, I've had a chance to connect with a number of people, but one of the reasons I love our church a lot is because of the recovery ministry that we lead on Friday nights called Lifelines. And Lifelines meets in our Saturday night venue. It meets every Friday night. There's hundreds of people who choose this church as a place where they're gonna take their next steps in recovery. And in my time being here, I've had a chance to meet some of you who are walking through recovery. I've had a chance to connect with some of you who are a family member walking alongside someone who's in recovery. And that's been such a benefit to me, because my understanding of recovery was from a distance, that my grandfather is an addict on multiple levels, but my parents really did keep him at a distance or kept him away because of the number of things that he were working through. So I was completely ignorant to all of it. And yet, as I've had a chance to sit in conversations with you, or us being able to talk about that, like, shout out to everyone in Lifelines on Fridays. Like, you got so much love from me to you. And here's just what's been incredible to me. Like, it could be true of you right now. Like, it could be true that you're an addict. It could be true that you're a cheater. It could be true that you're a liar. It could be true that you're messed up. It could be true that you're broken. But that's not the truth about who you are. It's not the truth about who you were created to be. Every one of us is trying to take our next step forward. So it could be easy for us to say Lifelines and not consider us. Every one of us, regardless of whether you're in recovery or not, you're trying to take your next step, and you're trying to work through your own issues. And so what may be true about you today may not be the truth about who you are. And what love can do is it can look at the circumstance and it can look at what's true. And it could say that may be true about right now, but it's not true about forever. Hey, this may be true about our relationship right now, but it's not the truth about forever. This may be true about our friendship, or this may be true about this circumstance, but it's not the truth about forever. What we're able to do is because love is going to trust, love trusts the process and believes that the future is better than what we're currently in. And so everything that this person is and everything that they're supposed to be, we carry that into always. And so here's a question you could ask, one that could potentially help you as you're working through trust, or a question that you could ask that would help to increase trust with another person. Here's the screen, what we'll put on the screen for you. Is there anything that's hard for you to talk about with me? It's something you could look at a friend to. It's something that you could look at your husband, wife to, and ask them the question, hey, is there anything that's really hard for you to talk to me about? A question you could ask yourself is there an area of your life that you're not willing to share with other people? And I would ask the question, why? Because if there's a part of your life that other people aren't allowed to speak into or talk about, it creates an area of danger for us. And what would it be like for you to trust someone and to let them in, and for them to be able to give voice and support to you in that season? So is there anything that's hard for you to talk to me about? So if we're able to trust and rely on these people in other areas of our life, we could also trust and rely on them in this one. Because love always protects, love always trusts, and love always hopes. Now, hope's something we've had a chance to speak a lot about here recently. We've had some series around it. We've had different topics about it. Hope's something I love because I feel like we could never get enough of it. Like, we're never gonna be too hope-filled or too hopeful, right? We're always gonna need a little bit more hope. And my favorite definition of hope is this one. It says that hope is an expectation or belief in the fulfillment of something desired. Hope is to look forward with confidence. And love always hopes. Love sees everything that's going on, all of the stuff, all the circumstances, all the issues, and hope has an expectation or belief that these things are not the end, that this isn't the way it's always gonna be, this isn't how forever is going to see, and we're gonna be able to look past it. And what's crazy for us is that hope can make a really great definition, but it's a really hard thing to live out. That I don't know anybody who's like, you know what, I'd love to go through this situation where I need some hope, that I don't know how I'm gonna make it, I don't know how I'm gonna get through, but I've got this expectation or belief that I will. I don't know anyone who loves that, right? We love the product, but we don't love the process, because hope can be a lot like fog. That you know there's a direction, but you have no idea which way to go, and you have no idea how to see your way. And I wanna be sure when we're talking about hope, like what I'm not talking about is a hope that ignores your circumstances, or a hope that goes around your circumstances, or a hope that dismisses your circumstances. I'm talking about the kind of hope that only works in the midst of your circumstances. In the middle of whatever you're in, the kind of hope and expectation and beliefs of something to look forward to with confidence in the very midst of it. Only love can provide that kind of hope. About 10 years ago, Rachel and I, my wife, we had a chance to make a really, really great friend of ours that we had both moved from different parts of the country and had kind of met in the middle of it. And so we had become friends that way. And as we developed our friendships, one of the things that we learned pretty early on into our relationship with her is that she was trapped in a very abusive relationship, physically, emotionally, every aspect of it. And so as that information became public, her husband, who she was with, left. And he moved to a different part of the country. He was gone. And so it left her to kind of pick up the pieces, to figure out all the other things that were happening. And so when you're in the spot like that, right, when you move from, I had all of these hopes and all these desires, there was this family that we were gonna start, there were kids we were gonna enter into, we had just taken this huge step together to start pursuing our dreams. Like, where do you go when that starts to happen? And so for her, she had gone to a couple of places. That as a musician, that she kind of returned to writing and just started writing songs in the midst of her own grief and in the midst of her own suffering. And those songs became incredible gifts to other people that when they were walking through their own process, they started to sing those songs and they became anchors and hopes for them. She also connected to this incredible group of women that were able to surround her and support her. Were able to help walk through that, to tell her that, hey, this may be true right now, but it's not the truth about forever. But then as she started getting older, it's not like the dream went away. She still had a dream to be married. She still had a dream to be kids. And now she started to ask the question, but what's gonna happen now that I'm starting to get old? And one of the most unbelievable moments happened that years down the road, my wife and I had a chance to sit at her wedding and watch as she had a chance to get married again. And it was the most unbelievable circumstance. Because from her words, it's as if God hid this guy in some random cave somewhere And he emerged from the cave, and all of a sudden they met. And it was like, I don't know how you were hidden. I don't know how no one else was able to find you, but I was. And then as they stood there, and as I watched him look at her and say the ways that he was going to commit to her, man, it was just the most unbelievable moment because I saw what she walked through. And I've also had a chance to see as they've started their marriage, as they've started their family, as they've moved into their dream house, as they've both found jobs that have just like unleashed their potential. And I have this moment where I can look back and I'm like, that's what love does. That's real hope. That's hope in the midst of like, I have no idea how all of the dreams and all the things I've ever longed for in my heart, I don't know how those are gonna come true. And yet God has a way of remembering it all. And I was sitting at her wedding, I can remember thinking, man, God didn't miss a moment. God didn't miss a detail. God didn't miss a prayer. God didn't miss anything that her heart really longed for and desired. God fulfilled every one of them as he led her through the fog. And some of you may be in that very same fog right now, having no idea how to see in the midst of your circumstances. But one of my beliefs about God and my belief about Jesus is he has the way to grab our hand and to lead us through the fog, and he provides us the most abundant sunshine that we had ever imagined if we'll simply hold out our hand and trust him. So here's a question I'd love for you to consider, one that you could ask of yourself and one that you could ask of others. Is there something you still long for to be true? Is there something in your heart, some dream that you had, something that was there maybe as a kid or maybe early on in your life that you still wish that were true? There's a little piece of hope there. It's a question you could ask to somebody else, right? Hey, is there something that you still wish were true? Is there something in our relationship that you wish were still possible? Is there still something you're longing for to be true? Because I believe the answer to that question unleashes hope in our life. And I believe as we start to walk that out together, hope believes and looks forward in confidence that we're gonna be able to see that day. And love always hopes. Love always protects, love always trusts, love always hopes, and love always perseveres. When you start to look at perseverance and you start to see this together, like love endures through it. Love's gonna be able to make it, right? We had talked about it already, but love perseveres in that we are gonna carry one another despite the difficult circumstances that are coming our way. Love doesn't weaken over time, right? Love isn't something we fall into and fall out of. Love is this commitment and decision. No matter what comes our way, we're gonna walk this out together. It looks at the person and says, the sum total of who you are, I'm about that. I'm about you. My life is better because you're in it. And I'm gonna help you no matter what comes our way. We're gonna make it together. And since moving here, when I came here, I didn't have a connection to anybody here. So I moved here and just was like, now I'm starting my adult life all over. And so I've had a chance to connect with some of you as friends. Some of the best connections I've ever had have come through in groups for us. And so there's a couple that we met in groups that as we met them, as is true of every relationship, we were ignorant to some of the circumstances that they had prior to coming into the relationship. And so as we met them, we started to talk, and there, you could see that the trust was increasing. But I can also remember hearing parts of their story, that as they were getting ready to get married, there was a day where they had kind of gone on a trip, and he had contracted this incredibly rare virus. And the effect of that virus is almost instantaneously he was paralyzed. So they had gone from planning their wedding and all the things that they were hoping for to almost immediately he needs a primary caregiver every day. And that's how they started their relationship. And you could see pictures from their wedding where, again, they intended to be able to dance together and he's in a wheelchair. And so they started to walk that process out, and incredibly, like through a lot of prayer and a lot of physical therapy, he's able to walk again. And you could see him here on this campus. It's an unbelievable moment, but he's able to walk. And so as he started to walk again, it gave them this moment where they said, this could be where we start a family now. That forever our focus has been on caring for you, but now let's like have children and welcome them in. So as they started, got ready to start a family, the first month passed and nothing. And the second month passed and nothing. And then months turned into years and nothing. And when we met them, it wasn't, they were years into this journey and years into this process. And so I can remember the very first night where we had kind of talked afterwards, and I could see that they were like upset about something. And so they told me, like, here's what we've been struggling with. We've been struggling with the fact that we can't start a family, we can't have children. And I can remember, like, my commitment to them is like, man, tell me when you're going to see the doctors. tell me as you're talking about decision, man, Rachel and I, we're with you. We're praying with you. We're going to walk this out with you. So I can remember almost every doctor's appointment and every time of prayer. And I can remember when they said, well, maybe this isn't for us. And maybe we're going to consider adoption or we're going to consider fostering kids. Like maybe that's the way we're going to have a family. And I can also remember the day where they pulled me aside afterwards and said, Justin, hey, we got some news for you. We're pregnant. And I can remember, like, I could care less about the people who are around me. I was just like, oh, and then I started crying, and I'm a hugger by nature. Some of you have figured that out. So I'm like, yes, yes. And I can remember calling my wife because she's on the way home, and I was like, Rachel, they're pregnant. And my wife's like, oh, like crying. My boys are in the back. Mom, what's wrong? She's like, they're happy tears, boys, right? And so just an unbelievable moment. And we were sitting in our small group on Monday. And as we were sitting around with friends and they were talking, I can remember she looked at him and she said, throughout our marriage, there's been times where you've had to carry me or where I've had to carry you. And I remembered thinking and like anticipating what I was going to speak on this weekend. And I was like, that's what it is. Love always perseveres. That when you look at a person and say, hey, there's days where I'm going to have to pick you up. And there's going to be days where you're going to have to pick me up. And then I sat there and I thought about it, and we're literally days away where they're gonna hold their first child. And there could have been days where they gave up. There could have been days where they quit. And every one of us would have said, man, that's a reasonable choice. Because of what you've gone through, because of what's happened, I would completely understand if you quit. And the reality is that none of us would ever say any of the things that happened to them were good. Like we wouldn't say, hey, so you got paralyzed, but man, it really brought you guys closer together. That's good. No, we wouldn't say, man, you went years not knowing if you'd ever have children. That was good. No, but just like coffee, just like the process, the end result of that thing is good. And it's incredible the way that God is able to take all this mess that is our life, all these random ingredients that make us up, and he's able to put those together and says, look what I can produce from that. That is good. And he is good. So here's a question for you to consider, one you can use in a relationship and one you can ask yourself. We'll put it up on the screen for you. What would you tell someone else if they were in your shoes? There's moments where we have no idea what to do, and we have no idea how we're going to make it. One of the questions I love to do is just zoom out on your stuff. If you were sitting down for coffee with somebody else and they started to tell you the things that you were walking through, what would you say back to them? What would you say? Here's what I think you should do. Because odds are it's probably what you need to do. And then maybe you've got someone and you don't know the answer, you don't know what to say, you don't know how you're gonna be able to help them in the midst of what they're walking through, that you could ask them the question, what would you tell someone else if they were in your shoes? Because odds are the way for us to be able to persevere and the way for us to be able to take the next step is for us to be able to know this is the way for us to do that. And so as we start to work through this list and we start to see the sum total of all of these things, right? Everything that these words capture, and we're gonna take that always into forever. You may be sitting here and you may be going, that's not possible. Like I could never do that. Like if that's the standard, I fall woefully short. And here's what I wanna tell you. You're absolutely right. If throughout this series, like your concept of what we were trying to do is to say, hey, if you take this principle and apply it to your life, that's gonna work. If you take this and apply it to your life, that's gonna work. Man, we've missed the mark. That you wouldn't need to be here for that. We could have just sent you an email. Here's week 1 principles, week 2 principles, week 3 principles. Walk those out, it's gonna be great. Here's the reality of what we are talking about. Our belief is that God is the epitome and the fulfillment of all things love. And that he's the designer of it, the creator of it. He's the one who set an original thing in motion. And so our belief is that God is that kind of love. And when God put himself on the cross for us and hung himself up there to die, that he was showing the unbelievable love that he had. And when he walked out of the grave alive, he told every one of us we could have a brand new life. And his promise to us was that the very same thing that brought him back from the dead, the very same power of God that did that is the very same power of God that starts to live inside each and every one of us. So that the same love that brought Jesus back is the same love that empowers you and me. So where I don't have the ability to be patient and I don't have the ability to be kind, Jesus does. And because Jesus is alive in me, it comes out of me. I don't have the ability to stop all these does not behaviors, but Jesus, because he's inside of me, does. And there's no way I could be an always kind of loving person, but because Jesus is, I am. And what's incredible about this little section that we've been reading is as true as it is for us to be able to apply it to our relationships and to people we love, this is fulfilled in who Jesus is. So what I want us to do is to see Jesus in this, and I've just added his name for us to be able to read together. So Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind. Jesus does not envy. Jesus does not boast. Jesus is not proud. Jesus does not dishonor others. Jesus is not self-seeking. Jesus is not easily angered. Jesus keeps no record of wrongs. Jesus does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Jesus always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And he does that for you. And he does that for me. It's a commitment he made to each one of us long before we were ever born, long before we were ever created, long before we had stuff that got messed up and we felt like he needed to fix. Jesus did that long before. And so when we say yes to him, that promise that he gave to us starts to live in our hearts. It's the very same spark that put the whole church through electricity, and it sent the message around the world, what we talked about last month. It's the reason why we'd frame a series around come and see everything that Jesus is and who he does, and like see all the things that have caused people to believe. Because Jesus is. It causes us to not envy or boast or be easily angered. It causes us not to be proud. It causes us to be patient and kind. It causes us to protect and trust and hope and persevere. This is the process that produces the product that every one of us is longing and searching for. This is the way that makes coffee and love incredible. That if we would trust the process that God is leading each one of us through, that we would see the unbelievable product of love he's producing in us and what he's producing in our lives. And there's a verse we haven't shared with you yet. It's one that comes immediately after these verses we've read. It's 3 words that I want to share with you as we close out today. It's verse 8. Love never fails. This kind of love, the Jesus kind of love, the always and forever, everything that you are, I trust and believe what may be true about you today is not the truth about you. I'm going to be able to walk this out. That love never fails. And you may be in the midst of something right now that feels unbelievable. What I want to tell you today is Jesus hasn't failed yet. And if we would simply trust and say yes to him, we would see the way that God can lead us through the fog, even if we can't see the way. And so here's some ways that each one of us will have a chance to say yes today. For some of you, as you walk into the room, and this is your very first time coming to church, or maybe today you're walking into the room and you're making a comeback today, like you were at church a while ago, but you fell off and you knew you needed to start that relationship up again. One of the ways that we'll provide for you to say yes today is for you to say yes to the all and always love of Jesus. That he would take everything that you are, all of your stuff, and that we could say yes, that we trust him. For some of you, you need to return back to always. Right, that maybe it was a commitment you made long ago and some circumstances and difficulties came in, but today you're saying, man, I'm going to say yes to that again. And I'm going to start that back up in my friendships, in my relationship, in my marriage, that it would be a chance for you to say yes to that. And for some of you, that you could say yes to live now in light of your future desire. Maybe you're not where you want to be. Maybe things aren't playing out the way you thought it would. Maybe you've got some things in life that you don't see how it's going to go. One of the best ways for us to be able to live is to say, let that hope be alive in your heart again. Something you're still longing for to be true. And you look forward to that thing and you say, I'm going to live for that to be true. I'm not going to live in light of what's around me. So can we do this as we close out today? Can we all stand up to our feet real quick? And what I'm going to invite you to do is you stand up in this last couple of minutes. I'm going to invite you to bow your head and close your eyes. Not because there's something magical about that posture or something magical about that moment, but I want to just create space for each one of us to have a chance to reflect before we get out of here today. So as you're doing that, as you're bowing your head, as you're closing your eyes, if you're in the room today and you're saying, hey, I want to say yes to Jesus. I want to say yes to the all and always love of God that takes everything that I am, all of my stuff, all of my issues. He takes that into account and he says yes to all of that, but the yes of God that says he gives us a brand new life. If you're saying yes to Jesus today, maybe you don't even know everything that you're saying yes to, but you're like, I want to say yes to that. Could you lift your hand up real high? You're either saying yes for the first time or today you're making a comeback. Could you lift your hand up? Wow, that's incredible. Can I tell you something real quick before we move on to the other two? 19 years ago this week, I said yes to Jesus for the first time. Yeah, I think it's awesome too. And
in almost 20 years, God has changed my life. And I know each and every week we have a chance to do this, but I want to tell you, I believe in my heart, you just made the greatest decision of all. And I don't want you to lose the impact of this. Man, we started this church for this reason, so that you would say yes. And we don't want to miss you, and we don't want to miss this moment. So could you do me a favor? I know it's an extra ask on this, and you had no idea you were doing that. Could you stop by Guest Connect today before you leave? There'll be some people there. I would love for you to say to them, hey, I said yes to Jesus today. And you may not even know all of that, but man, there were like 20 people who raised their hand right now. And we want to help you take your next step. To some of you, you're saying, hey, I fell off on the always, but today I want to step back into it. I know there's some areas in my life when it comes to protect, trust, endure, hope. If that's you and you're saying, hey, I need to return to that always and forever kind of love in my life, could you lift your hand up real high too? Because I want to be able to pray for you. So if you're saying, hey, there's some areas I need to trust more, I need to protect more, I need to hope more, I need to endure more, could you lift your hand up real high? Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. If you're in the room today and there's something in your life that you're still longing for to be true, maybe it's a dream that you let go or a hope that's kind of slipped away, and you're just saying today, I want to hope again. I want to live today in light of this desire I have for the future. Could you lift your hand up real high too? Because I'm going to be able to pray for you. Yeah, it's incredible. Thanks so much. All right, let's pray. Jesus, I love you so much. And God, I am so thankful. 19 years ago, God, you just reached down and touched my heart. And God, I said yes, and I didn't even know what I was saying yes to. And God, in this room today, there were dozens of people who made that same decision. And I pray today, Jesus, as we all take our next steps forward in following you, God, I pray that the very same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the very same power that transforms our lives. And it shapes us into who you made us to be. So God, there's a lot of stuff that's true about us today, but the greatest truth of our lives is that we were bought and paid for by the death of Jesus. And he's given us a brand new life today. God, for those of us who have lost some piece of love, either because of circumstances or people or issues, God, I pray we'd return back to the always kind of love you promised. That we would always hope, we'd always trust, we'd always protect, we'd always persevere. God, you would help us no matter what we're walking through. God, for those of us who are here to hope again, God, the dream you placed in our heart and this thing that hasn't gone away yet, God, would you help us today to believe again? And would we live today, God, in light of what we desire for the future? And we would see, God, that you're holding our hand and you're taking us every step of the way. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. We love you, Crossing Church. We'll see you next week as we kick off a new series.